Our boy asks the horde of goblins if they are ready, as they charge at him with their weapons all at once. Our boy takes them one by one with his mace that is floating freely in air, and after he defeats tons of them, one of the goblins shoots an arrow at him from out of his line of sight, but our boy manages to deal with it with his club. Our boy, whose name is Ban Yu-won, is angry at them for shooting arrows without any warning after charging at him, while relying on sheer numbers, and tells them that if they think he came to the dungeon relying solely on this level of power, then they are mistaken. After that, Ban Yu-won tells his weapon, who goes by the name of Bang Manga, to transform, which causes the mace to transform into an automatic rifle and orders it to take down the horde of goblins that is charging at him. The scene then shifts to Ban Yu-won, who is 4 years old, and is reading the book in its original language, which surprises his mother, who then tells his father how genius their son is. Ban Yu-won then suddenly starts speaking English, which further surprises her mother, while his father is happy that his wife gave birth to a genius. However, they get surprised when Ban Yu-won suddenly starts talking in languages from countries he has never even been to, and even his father did not teach him these languages. As they are wondering about this, Ban Yu-won's grandfather enters the house, amazed that his grandson has inherited the bloodline of their ancestors, and he is happy that a child who will fulfill their family's long-cherished wish to reclaim the Tower of Babel has been born. Ban Yuan's mother realizes that Yuan's grandfather has again started talking about the lore of their ancestors and calls her little daughter Yumi, who was with Yuan's grandfather, towards her, while Yuan's father tells him that he should wash up first. Yuan's grandfather gets annoyed that his own family does not believe him and tells them that the Tower of Babel certainly exists. However, none of them pay any attention to his lore, and instead ask their daughter if she had fun playing with her grandpa. Yuan's grandfather realizes that they have no intention of believing in him, so he takes Yuan's art book and colors from him and starts telling the story of his ancestors to our boy. Yuan's grandfather mentions that a long time ago, when chaos filled the whole world, the great ancestor of the Ban family possessed the ability to allow everyone to communicate. With that power, the ancestor of Ban family led the people and built a tower that would never collapse, and that tower is famously known as the Tower of Babel. Yuan's tiny brain translates the tower to building and asks his grandfather if their ancestor was the owner of a huge building, to which Yuan's grandfather, instead of answering his questions, tells our boy that their ancestor was the master of language, who was able to interpret and transform all languages, and as their descendants, they should never forget how great their ancestor was. However, Yuan keeps insisting to his grandfather to tell him the location of the building. Yuan's grandfather responds that he, too, is unsure of the location of the building, which dampens our boy's enthusiasm. However, he tells him that, while he is unsure of the location of the building, he is certain that their family will regain all of their power and glory once they find the Tower of Babel, which amazes little Yuan. Yuan remembers this vividly now that he is in university, and every time his grandfather told him stories about their ancestors, he hoped that his extraordinary linguistic talent would help fulfill their family's long-held wish. However, his ability far exceeded that expectation. The scene then shifts to Yuan, who is now a university applicant and is looking at his score to see if he passed the university test. Yuan believes that, judging by the score, he would be able to easily score the seat in the political and diplomacy department of the university, but he does not understand the reason for the delay in results. As he is waiting, he notices that the screen of his laptop starts glitching and a weird blue glass screen with twisted writing appears on his laptop. Our boy has never seen that script, but somehow he is able to read that the message is from the best academy in the alternate dimension, and it is congratulating our boy on passing the document screening. Yuan does not understand how he is able to read that language. However, the message does not stop here, and it tells Yuan that he is being summoned to the practical evaluation value, where he will become a prospective student if he passes the test. Yuan wonders if his sister Ban Yumi is playing prank on him, so Yuan says that he would let it slide if she comes out now and apologize. But as he is finding the person behind the prank, he notices that the weird blue screen is gone, as he can finally see the acceptance letter from the university he applied to. Yuan concludes that maybe he was seeing things because he was too nervous about the admission in university. However, as he is thinking about it, Yuan gets summoned to the practical evaluation value. In the meantime, Ban Yumi enters his room to ask Yuan whether he got admitted to the university. However, she gets surprised when she sees his brother suddenly disappear in front of her. Ban Yuan gets summoned to the practical evaluation value, where the special practical evaluation for candidates from lower dimensions is being commenced. Yuan cannot believe that he really got summoned, which makes him wonder if it is an illusion or a game, but soon realizes that it might not be the case because his head hurts seriously. The system tells Yuan to defeat the goblins and destroy the dungeon core. However, Yuan does not understand anything about the special exam, as he does not remember even applying to that institute and begs the system to send him back. As our boy is crying, two goblins appear right in front of him, as they can sense that their prey is here. Yuan wonders if the goblins are talking about him, and gets surprised when he realizes that he can even understand what the goblins are saying. Yuan wonders if he really has to defeat the goblins and destroy the dungeon to be able to get out of here, because it feels like something out of a game or a novel, but with the pain in his head and the sense of reality in this place, it feels too real, even though he cannot understand what is going on. Yuan is confused as to how he would be able to defeat huge goblins, as modern people cannot be even sure of beating a chihuahua. But as he is thinking, one of the goblins strikes his club right near our boy, which shocks Yuan, as he wonders if the goblin is able to see him. However, after seeing the high goblin swing his club a few more times like an idiot, Yuan concludes that the goblin is indeed can't see. Yuan decides that he should not get panicked and starts to stand up as slow as he can, but he mistakenly makes a light noise while standing up, which is enough for the goblins to know where Yuan is, as in the very next moment, the goblin jumps at Yuan, attacking him with his club, but Yuan somehow dodges the goblin's strike. The goblin mentions to the other goblin that the sound came from here, and he is sure that someone is here, so they should not let it escape. Yuan tries his best to calm himself down and realizes that these goblins can't see him, and they seems to hunt by cornering their prey while talking to each other, as they are quite sensitive to sounds and movements, which means that no matter how well our boy tries to hide, they will eventually catch him. Yuan thinks that he should start thinking a way out of this mess in case he wants to live, and decides to use the habits of the goblins against them. Our boy throws two stones in front of him, which alerts the goblins, causing them to rush towards the source sound. But as they are busy finding the source of the sound, Yuan throws a huge stone towards the goblin, which hits on his head, giving him the idea that his prey is behind. The goblin hurls his club behind him, oblivious of the fact that goblin was following him, and hits the face of the goblin that was behind him. Yuan utilizes this opportunity and shouts at the goblin in their own language that the prey is resisting, which causes the goblin to strike at the other goblin. The attack was strong enough to take down the high goblin. However, it ends up falling upon the goblin, which renders goblin immobile. Yuan, who is watching the situation, notices that there is a club lying beside the goblin, so he picks it up and stands in front of the goblin, telling him that he should have seen this coming since the goblin tried to kill him. Our boy hesitates a bit before attacking. However, he tells himself to not hesitate, because if he hesitates for even a bit, he would not be able to even finish off this creature, and he would lose his chance of getting out of here forever. Yuan takes down the goblin, and our boy realizes that he has somehow managed to survive for now. However, as he is standing there, shiny runes flow out of the bodies of goblins, and the system congratulates our boy on his first successful hunt in the dungeon, rewarding him with the power of the higher dimension, which ends up amazing our boy beyond belief. The yellow light completely engulfs our boy, and the system mentions that the power of the Babylonian code has been unlocked, which will be displayed using ideograms, which is a language our boy is familiar with. The system then informs Yuan that the Chinese characters have been registered, which convey meanings directly through their form, phonetic characters that represent sound. The system goes on to say that two common concepts of demon and life were seized from the two goblins that Yuan just killed, while other concepts are too complex or insignificant for the holder's current level to absorb. Our boy is shocked to find out that his ability is not just about language, but he can also extract different concepts from things. The system absorbs 0.2 demon points from the goblins and informs Yuan that demons are inherently a concept that humans cannot possess, so it is recommended to store or separate this in the Babylonian code and apply it to other objects. After realizing that he is able to either keep or apply the concept, our boy grabs the concept of life and decides to try it on himself, which ends up increasing his life from 10 to 10.4 points. The system informs Yuan that his overall abilities and potential are enhanced, which is something Yuan can experience right away as he realizes that he is feeling more confident than before. Yuan power also absorbs 0.2 points of the concept, which makes Yuan's body quite healthier as it increases his strength. Yuan gets Super C when he realizes that it is not just a feeling. Rather, his grip strength, leg strength, skin, and many other body parts have improved, and he feels a lot stronger than before. Yuan finds out that the reason he was able to achieve that was because he absorbed different concepts from the goblins and understood them. As he is getting amazed over his new strength, Yuan realizes that the goblins that had their abilities absorbed disappeared, and all that is left are two clubs, which makes our boy conclude that if the act of applying concepts works not just on his own self but also on other objects, then he might be able to clear this dungeon and go back home. Yuan decides to utilize the concept of demon onto the club, which he is going to use as a weapon, and stands up to kill all the goblins. The scene then shifts to the Yuan who is standing in front of the dungeon core after defeating the horde of goblins with his newly founded powers. Yuan finally manages to destroy the dungeon core, after which the system congratulates him for passing the practical test of the lower dimension special examination, which makes our boy wonder if he is finally allowed to go home. But he was not sent to his home. Rather, the system transferred our boy to the dormitory. Yuan was transferred to Union Academy, which was located in a world Yuan had never seen before. The system once again congratulates Yuan on passing the practical exam and becoming a provisional student, after which the system tells Yuan to wear the assigned uniform neatly and attend the interview. Yuan gets shocked after he hears the mention of interview, but he cries at his fate when the system tells him to wear the proud uniform of Union Academy, as he wants to enjoy his freshman days. Yuan, who unwillingly wears the Union Academy uniform, complains that the idea of an interview right after being put in a near-death situation is ridiculous, so our boy decides to give the person in charge of this entire practice exam a piece of his mind when he meets him. Yuan walks out of his room while wearing his uniform, intending to rant at the person in charge for what he did to him, and at the very least, decides to demand compensation for his transportation. But as Yuan enters the room where interviews are being held, he is greeted by a beautiful woman, who, despite having green skin like that of an alien, is very charming. The beautiful woman introduces herself as Yamina, and tells Yuan that she is the professor of magic combat at Union Academy. Yuan forgets everything he wanted to rant about to the person in charge, and becomes timid in front of Yamina's beauty. Professor Yamina congratulates our boy on passing the practical exam and informs Yuan that his test process caught the full attention of all of the faculty, as he is the first student in 500 years to create a new artifact during the evaluation process, which is something that even the professor finds very amazing and mentions that it is an exceptional case as it is even beyond the special examination. Yuan does not care whether he is special or not, as he was brought here without knowing anything and almost died. Yuan wonders if their way of thinking is different because they are from different worlds and decides to leave this strange school right after the interview ends. However, he changes his mind when he gazes at the tower from the window. Yuan asks Professor Yamina about the name of the pillar, which surprises Yamina, because it is supposed to be a common knowledge, but soon remembers that the people from the lower dimensional worlds do not know anything about Union Academy or the pillar. Professor Yamina informs Yuan that the pillar is the very reason the Union Academy was established, as the very purpose of this academy is to raise students with the greatest talents across dimensions and help them reach the top of the tower, and that is the aspiration of the Union Academy. Professor Yamina informs Yuan that the name of that pillar is the Tower of Babel, which is a dungeon among the dungeons and is the origin of all the mysteries and dangers in this world, which makes it the final hope that is shared by all the dimensions. Yuan gets amazed to find out that the building he heard so much about is right in front of him, but he is a little bit surprised after finding out that it is a dungeon, which makes our boy wonder whether strange monsters have taken over the tower. However, he decides to not worry about it and decides to take back the glory of his family and his ancestors. At that very moment, our boy decided to enroll in Union Academy, and thanks to the special treatment from Professor Yamina, Yuan was sent back home, where he gathered his whole family and explained everything that happened with him. Yuan's grandfather was shocked to find out that his grandson finally found the Tower of Babel and praises him a lot. The scene then shifts to the lower dungeon of Union, where our boy is inside the Hobgoblin Cave, preparing for enrollment while massacring the hobgoblins present in the cave. Our boy is killing the goblins with his automatic rifle, which is possible because of his enhanced abilities, which he had limited only to language before, but now Yuan's Babylonian code is completely different, and after killing many goblins, he has seized many concepts. Yuan has managed to seize 3.4 points of the concept of demon, 6.8 points of the concept of life, and 0.57 of the concept of shooting. Yuan is now able to verbalize, absorb, and manipulate the concepts of all objects, and when he defeats an enemy, he is able to recognize the concept he can recognize, and the more he acquires, the stronger he becomes. Yuan imbued the concept that he obtained from his first dungeon inside the Blind Goblin Cave into a club and strengthened it into a weapon. Yuan's current weapon is a club that is infused with ghostly energy and is the very first artifact that Yuan created, which not only can reveal its true form at the owner's command but can also transform and act freely, which makes it an autonomous artifact. Yuan is very fond of his weapon, which he made by chance, and because of it, he was also able to get good evaluation results. After defeating all the dungeons, Yuan decides to sort out the spoils by doing a code check. But as he is sorting out the spoils, he realizes that there is a soul concept, which is something he has never seen before even after gaining lots of concepts. As he is wondering, Yuan's weapon starts acting weirdly, which makes Yuan realize that he probably wants this concept, So he decides to give this new concept to his weapon along with some life, ghost, and spirit concept. Yu-Won takes out the concepts and imbues them into his club, which starts a process where the combined concepts form a perfect harmony, which causes a transformation in Yu-Won's artifact. The system mentions that combination of 2.5 points of the concept of ghost and 4 points of the concept of beast creates a perfect synergy that results in a fusion that goes far beyond the current depth. Yu-Won is shocked at the mention of the concept of beast and wonders if one of the concepts that he had left alone suddenly fused. The transcendental fusion results in the formation of the ghost beast, which transforms Yu-Won's cherished club into a beautiful white snake. Yu-Won realizes that the combinations of the characters for Ghost and Beast form the Ghost Beast, which is something he thinks is straight out of fantasy. Yu-Won wonders if he can touch the snake, so he moves his hand closer to the white snake, but hesitates for a moment when he sees no reaction from the snake. However, a few moments later the snake starts acting friendly with our boy, which makes our boy conclude that the white snake has the same personality it had when it was a club, and wonders if it can still transform itself into a magic gun or shield. Yu-Won finds his newly transformed weapon quite cute and decides to name it Eve. Yu-Won then decides to head back after checking the growth stats, and based on what he has experienced so far, the life in his growth stats is a concept that is quite similar to level in a game, while flesh, on the other hand, seems to represent physical stats. However, Yu-Won does not understand the reason for his high soul stat. Yu-Won decides to skip what he does not understand and takes a look at all-seeing eyes and all-hearing ears, which he believes are related to his language skills. Yu-Won then decides to check the stats of Eve and asks if she believes that she is capable of surprising other people now, to which Eve shakes her head, but Yu-Won does not mind it because, to him, what matters is the growth rate. After successfully destroying the dungeon core, Yu-Won decides to return to Union Academy to attend his entrance ceremony, where the academy is decorated flashily for the entrance ceremony. Our boy gets teleported right in the middle of the summon hall and is surprised to find so many students and activates his all-seeing eyes, which are the eyes that read everything, and depending on the proficiency, they also allow the user to understand the aura and the spirit of a target more deeply. With the help of his all-seeing eyes, Yu-Won is able to find out that, unlike him, who entered through a special admission for lower dimensions, the regular students who came through the normal process look really strong, and Yu-Won thinks that they are at least 10 times stronger than him. However, even with his all-seeing eyes, Yu-Won is not able to find his seat, and as he is wondering about that, Yu-Won is approached by some students, who tell him to get lost at the end of the room if he is from a lower dimension, which is something Yu-Won already expected. As people who came in through the regular process have high opinions of themselves, and they are discriminating against our boy, just because he is from lower dimension. Yu-Won realizes that even in this prestigious academy, the people who have power and strength look down on those beneath them, which makes our boy wonder if this kind of thing is the same wherever people live. As Yu-Won is lost in his thoughts, a yellow-haired student, who is sitting at the end of the conference room, shouts at Ban Yu-Won, telling him that the special admission students are to be seated here. Yu-Won walks towards his seat and realizes that they are quite far from the rest of the seats, which make it feel like an exile, but as he is wondering about the seating position, Yu-Won looks at the stats of the special admission students and realizes that all of them have abnormally high stats, to the point that they easily mop the floor with the regular students. The yellow-haired student realizes that Yu-Won is lost in his own thoughts, so he brings him back to reality, on which Yu-Won greets a slight and mentions that these special seats are quite amazing. However, a slight does not find anything special with these chairs. Asalite is the handsome roommate of Yu-Won, whom he met at the dorm before the entrance ceremony, and their first meeting was a bit unusual, as a slight pointed his sword at our boy as soon as our boy entered the room and only lowered his sword when Yu-Won told him that he is a freshman in the Union Academy and a slight is his roommate, after which a slight apologized for his actions, telling Yu-Won his nerves were a bit sharp since he just finished a practical exam. Yu-Won's first impression of a slight were of a prince from a fairy tale, which had quite a bit of temper, but considering how a slight apologized first, Yu-Won thought that he would not be a bad guy. But Yu-Won soon realized that it was not the case because a slight made fun of Yu-Won for struggling at killing goblins, as even a new recruit with basic training could hunt a goblin easily, and bragged at Yu-Won for having a group of trolls and ogres as a practical exam opponent, which made our boy realize that a slight is a totally oblivious guy. Yu-Won did not mind having a slight's company, as it had been a while since he talked with someone, but as they were talking, Yu-Won realized that they had not even taken a shower, so he suggested to a slight that they should wash themselves up, to which a slight agreed, but as they were going to dorm shower, a slight felt awkward and told Yu-Won to go wash himself first. Yu-Won was surprised at this level of awkwardness, but he did not pay attention to it at that time. Yu-Won realizes that there are two other students sitting on the special admission designated seat, so he greets them one by one. However, he shies out when he greets the pink-haired girl. Yuan then greets the white-haired girl who is sitting beside the pink-haired girl and freaks out for a moment when he sees her staring at him. Yuan asks the white-haired girl if there is anything wrong, to which the white-haired replies that the thing wrapped around Yuan's arm is quite interesting, on which Yuan takes out Eve, asking the white-haired girl if she is talking about the snake. Yuan is amazed that white-haired girl is able to see Eve, and a slight is surprised to see the club from before change into a cute snake, while the pink-haired girl asks Yuan if she can touch it. The white-haired girl is quite impressed by Yuan, so she introduces herself as Dako Yun and tells Yuan that she is the daughter of a martial artist. Yun asks Yuan about his name, to which Yuan introduces himself and asks Yun if by martial she means people who know how to shoot energy blasts. Everyone lets out a giggle after hearing such a bizarre explanation of martial arts, and Yun tells our boy that his understanding is not entirely wrong, on which our boy adds that since they have got fantasy, there is no reason martial arts would not exist. The pink-haired girl introduces herself to Yuan as Rachel, while a slight, on the other hand, also introduces himself to Rachel and Yun, but Yun does not show any friendly behavior. Yuan then realizes that the ceremony is about to start and notices that Professor Yamina is also present at the ceremony. A slight asks Yuan if he also had a consultation with Professor Yamina, to which Yuan nods, asking a slight if he was also interviewed by Professor Yamina. As they are talking, the ceiling of the auditorium suddenly opens up, and everyone hears a voice, which induces a huge pressure and fear upon every student present at the ceremony. Every student, along with our boy, is shocked to experience this pressure. However, Yuan gathers enough strength to look at the sky and finds out that the source of this overwhelming pressure is something above them. Yuan notices that there is a massive eye in the sky, which is commencing the entrance ceremony for the 2557th Union Academy class. The scene then shifts to Professor Yamina, who asks the special students if they found the principal's speech impressive, to which no one says anything for a moment, but after a moment of silence, Yuan responds that it was incredible and asks Professor Yamina if the giant eye that was above them is supposed to be their principal. Everyone, along with Professor Yamina, is shocked to find out that Yuan was able to see that eye and had enough strength to look upon it in the sky, as most people were too intimidated to even look up. However, Yuan does not know if it really is an impressive thing, as Yun concealed itself completely using some kind of special method. To make sure he does not get any attention, Yuan changes his narrative, telling everyone that it felt like a giant eye was watching them. However, Professor Yamina does not pay any attention to that, telling Yuan that the being he saw was indeed the principal of this academy, and they would probably not see him again unless they achieve something special or cause an incident, but Professor Yamina feels that Yuan might end up getting a private meeting with the principal. However, Yuan believes that instead of a blessing, it looks more like a curse. Professor Yamina tells Yuan that it is not like that, as the achievements of the students are also her achievements as their professor, and tells everyone to work hard. A slight gets surprised after hearing this and asks Professor Yamina if she is going to be in charge of them, to which Professor Yamina nods, and formally introduces herself to the special students, informing them that she has been assigned as the homeroom professor for Class 11, which is the class for special admissions, telling them to work hard for the next 5 years. A slight asks the reason for Professor Yamina's being assigned as their homeroom teacher, because usually the lower-tier special admissions students are assigned to associate professors, to which Professor Yamina responds that it is true. However, the students of this year are so special that she was given the responsibility. Professor Yamina finds these 4 students really special and thinks that it is quite strange that only they were selected. After that, Professor Yamina advises them to be very careful of the hostility and the jealousy of the regular students, which ends up alerting our boy, as he realizes that the jealousy and hostility being mentioned by Professor Yamina is not just academic competition, but rather it refers to physical confrontations and fights between the regular students and special students, as matters outside of the internal competition protected by the school rules are things even professors are not able to interfere with. Yuan thinks that if one wants to grow by fighting with other students, then they will have to be strong enough to ignore the hostility and jealousy. Professor Yamina also advises the 4 of them to stick with each other, as 4 of them are very rare special admission students, and further adds that 4 of them are also party members that will climb the tower together until graduation. After explaining important things to them, Professor Yamina believes that this much of a heavy talk would be enough for now, and informs them that the Academy has prepared a small gift for all of them. Professor Yamina snaps her finger and vanishes from the room, telling the special students that she will explain further rules and details after they have received this artifact in front of them. All of them have received a pendant, which will act as their student ID, through which they can identify themselves and access all the facilities on the campus. Moreover, with the help of this pendant, they can even teleport anywhere within the Union realm. The teleport spell is Professor Yamina is beautiful, and as a slight says that they are teleported out in the academy grounds, and then they return to academy after Rachel chants the teleport spell. The special students find it quite weird, but a slight mentions that they have to take good care of this pendant whether they like it or not because they will need this pendant to keep this student ID with them if they want to enter the tower. As they are discussing this, Rachel mentions that she does not understand the reason Yuwon was left behind alone. Yun responds to Rachel that it might be even the principal noticed something special about Yuwon, that is why he called Professor Yamina despite knowing that they were about to have a tea party with Professor Yamina, because out of all the students, Yuwon was the only one who was able to look directly at the principal. The scene then shifts to the principal room where Yuwon is sitting in front of a puppet of principal and is scared to the point that he is trembling. Yuwon does not understand the reason he is having a private meeting with a principal on the very first day, even though he did not cause any trouble. Yuwon is keeping his head on the ground because of how scared he is of the principal. However, principal assures him that it is fine to look directly at him as his true form is not here. Yuwon slowly looks at the puppet that is right in front of him and asks the puppet if he should address him as principal or chancellor, to which the puppet responds that Yuwon can address him as master. The master then tells Yuwon that he normally does not interfere with the growth of students, which means that if they are weak, he leaves them weak, and if they are strong, then he leaves them strong. Moreover, he also does not care if they die in a tower or survive to seize power and glory, as he only has one goal, which is to witness with his very own eyes the one who reaches the end of the tower, making everything other than the tower meaningless to him. The master informs Yuwon that the reason he has called him is for that very purpose. Yuwon is amazed at the ambition of the master and thinks that from the time of his ancestors up until Yuwon, the Ban family has been determined to reclaim the tower along with all the power and glory it offers, and the very reason Yuwon is ready to risk his life is to reclaim the tower, but he wants to know what does tower means to the chancellor and other hundreds and thousands of students. Yuwon wants to know the reason everyone comes all the way to this dimension to climb the tower, so he asks the master about the reality of the tower, to which the master responds that the tower is the path to the divine, and it is a sort of trial that leads to the divine. Yuwon wonders if by divine the principle means what different tribes of the Amazon believe, and thinks that it is far more complicated than he thought it would be. The master then continues from before, telling Yuwon that even though he does not interfere with the hardships of the students, he is willing to make an exception this time exclusively for Yuwon, solely because he sees a huge potential in Yuwon, which he has not seen in anyone before him, so he uses his authority to make some arrangements to help Yuwon climb the tower. The master's magic reacts with the pendant Yuwon was wearing, after which the master informs Yuwon that he has expanded his exploration privileges outside the academy, which means that Yuwon can now travel to any dungeon, and with this, he hopes that Yuwon will make sure to hone his skills before climbing the tower. Yuwon asks if by outside, the master means dungeons that are outside the academy, to which the master nods and starts teleporting Yuwon out of his office, instructing him to improve his skills before he tries to climb the tower, and tells Yuwon that if he finds Yuwon's progress to be remarkable, he will unlock the next privilege for our boy. Before Yuwon gets completely teleported out of his office, he asks the master about the next privilege, to which the master responds that he would grant Yuwon the solo exploration of the tower and tells our boy that he looks forward to their meeting. Yuwon gets teleported right in front of Professor Yamina, who asks Yuwon about his meeting with the principal and how it went. However, Yuwon gets surprised when he sees Professor Yamina right in front of her, so he steps back a bit. Professor Yamina then asks Yuwon if the master is strange for always dismissing his visitors like that, even though he was waiting specifically for Yuwon from the start, to which Yuwon nods. Professor Yamina takes a look at Yuwon's pendant as she is amazed to find out that Yuwon was granted the permission to leave the academy, to which Yuwon asks Professor Yuwon if it is really a big deal, because the reason Master gave these privileges to him is so that Yuwon can improve quickly, to which Professor Yuwon responds that it is a very big deal, as Yuwon can not only freely explore the dungeons outside the tower but also can visit external cities at will, which means that our boy would be able to get a lot more experience and preparation than others, not to mention that it is unprecedented to give such privileges to irregular students. Our boy is relieved after hearing this because to him it felt like the master was telling him to take supplementary classes because he was too weak and had abilities that do not have any worth. Professor Yamina tells Yuwon that she is envious of him because usually, even professors are too busy to leave the academy at this time, which surprises Yuwon, while Professor Yamina adds that since Union is an academy, everything inside it is designed with the students in mind, which can be quite inconvenient for professors. The professor again mentions that Yuan would be able to explore dungeons and visit external cities in his spare time. Moreover, Yuan would also be able to stroll around shops, which is something Professor Yamina is not able to do, as she is a full professor. Professor Yamina expresses her envy at our boy, telling him that he would also be able to enjoy snacks as much as he wants, and also recommends our boy visit the external city known as Ronica, as there is a spring temple in that city which is absolutely amazing. Yuan gets confused by the sudden mention of various things and asks Professor Yamina if she wants something from that city. The scene then shifts to outside of Union Academy where Yuan is exploring different areas outside the Union Academy, and Professor Yamina has requested him to bring her 2 bottles of honeymoon wine which is made by the temple priest, as it is truly fantastic and quite famous for its sweet fruity aroma, rich bubbles, and lingering aftertaste, while Yuan, on the other hand, finds it weird that a professor is asking a student to run an errand. However, our boy is grateful that he got an inventory in advance. As he is going through his inventory, Yuan notices that there is a bag which his grandpa gave when he briefly stopped at his home before enrolling. When Yuan was getting prepared to leave for Union Academy after his brief stop, his grandpa brought to him a bag and told him to open it, allowing him to take as much as he wanted. Yuan asked his grandpa about the item in the bag, to which his grandpa responded that Yuan can see it for himself. Yuan was surprised to find dozens of pure gold ingots shining at him when he opened the bag, so he asked his grandpa if he is really allowed to take these, to which his grandpa responded that there is no problem, as these are the legacies of their ancestors who devoted themselves to finding the Tower of Babel, so Yuan is allowed to use all these gold ingots freely. Yuan thanked his grandfather for this useful gift. However, our boy found it quite hard to carry around because of how heavy it was, which irritated his grandpa, as he did not expect his grandson to be this weak. However, Yuan does not have to worry about that now that he has his own inventory, which has made things super convenient for him as all of his gold fits there perfectly. Our boy decides to take a few chunks of gold for his journey, since his grandfather said that gold is valuable everywhere in this world, and after making sure he has everything, Yuan decides to set foot into a new world. As our boy walks into the city of Ronica, he realizes that even though it is another dimension, the cityscape looks quite similar. However, he soon changes his opinion when he sees flying bikes above him, which makes him wonder about their mechanism. As our boy is being amazed at the flying bikes, 2 guards approach him, asking our boy about his identity as they have not seen him in these parts. But before our boy is able to say anything, they find out from Yuan's uniform that he is the student of Union Academy, so they greet him, telling Yuan that they are the guards responsible for the western boundary of the Academy City Ronica. Yuan also introduces himself, informing the guards that he is a first-year student at Union Academy, on which the guards ask Yuan if he has received permission from the Chancellor for roaming in the city. Yuan responds that he was told by the master that he could explore freely without any restriction, which is enough to satisfy the guards. The guards praise the master of Union Academy, telling Yuan that it is because of the hard work of the master and the academy staff that their city remains peaceful today, and they are endlessly graceful for their grace. Listening to such praise of the master and the academy makes Yuan realize that Union Academy has such a huge influence. After realizing that Yuan is a first-year student, the guards offer their assistance to Yuan as he would not know about the city and how it works, telling Yuan that it is a part of their job as guards, so if Yuan is curious about anything, then he should ask without hesitation. Yuan is relieved to learn that guards are willing to cooperate with him, so he points his finger up in the sky toward one of the flying bikes, telling the guards that he would like to purchase one of the flying bikes and inquires about its price. The scene then shifts to Yuan, who is driving one of the flying bikes swiftly as he soars the skies of the Ronica city with his weapon Eve, and he finds it overwhelmingly awesome. Yuan asks the guards about the price of these flying bikes, to which they responded that these flying bikes are quite expensive, as the basic model of these bikes costs 250,000 ronia. Yuan had no idea how much 250,000 ronia is worth, so he took out one of his gold chunks which he had withdrawn from inventory and asked the guards whether it will be possible to buy a flying bike with this brick of gold. The guards gasped after seeing that piece of gold on a first-year student, so they asked Yuan about how he was able to acquire such a large bar, as they could not believe it was even real. Yuan told them that it was gifted to him by his grandpa. The guards told Yuan that a single gold bar is worth 750,000 ronia, which is such a massive amount, so Yuan thinks that he should thank his grandpa for giving it to him so recklessly, as Yuan originally did not want to take it with him because it was heavy. As he is flying through the air, his weapon Eve suddenly shows herself, and our boy asks her opinion regarding this new flying bike which has been infused with Yo and Gue that has turned it into a living artifact with a will just like Eve. Ban Yuan informs Eve that the name of the flying bike is Lilith, and wishes for both of them to get along. In such a short amount of time, Yuwon managed to get the liquor for Professor Yamina, along with creating Eve's little sibling, and the only thing left to do is to head back to Union Academy on his new ride. The scene then shifts to cafeteria, where Yuwon's had a hangover from drinking with Professor Yamina last night, so a Slight offers him a glass of water, telling Yuwon that he is quite disappointed in him, as a Slight cannot believe that after the meeting, Yuwon went out without a word and came back with a hangover. Yuwon apologizes to a Slight, telling him that Professor Yamina insisted on drinking with her until the sunset, and their faces both turn red, not to mention that it was Yuwon's first time drinking wine, while Rachel, on the other hand, not paying attention to the conversation that is going on, thinks that Yuwon smells like flour. A Slight mentions that if Yuwon had told me that he was with Professor Yamina earlier, then a Slight would not have waited or worried for him. Yun notices that Yuwon is wearing a badge on his uniform, so she asks Yuwon if that badge is the sign of the representative role which he got in return for drinking with Professor, to which Yuwon responds that if one thinks of being something like class president, then it would be true. A Slight remarks that because Professor Yamina is in charge of them, they have no choice but to accept Yuwon as their representative. However, Yun responds that instead of Yuwon, she is more deserving of representing the special class because she is the strongest here, which Yun believes Yuwon would agree with. However, a Slight believes that it is a strange way to put it since they are supposed to be equal comrades, but they need to clear something up regarding what Yun just said about being the strongest here, and mentions that the attitude of acting like one is the best is not good for their future tower climbing. Moreover, a Slight adds that he also does not agree with Yun being the strongest. Yun scoffs at a Slight's comments and mentions that it is ironic for the same person who asked the Professor Yamina yesterday about climbing the Tower of Babel alone to be talking about equal comrades, as there is not equality in that. Yuwon and Rachel both remember that a Slight said something like that, so they both give him a stare, as if he is the culprit. However, a Slight assures them that it was just out of curiosity, and it is not that he does not want to party with them. Yuwon, who was watching this whole drama, expected that there would be some animosity starting from the morning class. So to deal with it, he was going to suggest making a plan out in advance, but before our boy was able to say anything, the group already got a rough start. Our boy does not want to be class president either, but after watching this drama, our boy kinda get why Professor Yamina chose him out of the four of us, as a Slight is remarkably clueless, but his pride is ridiculously strong, while Yun, on the other hand, is self-centered and strong individual, but is bound to make enemies. And Rachel does not have the personality to lead or nurture others, as he is surprisingly passive. All of this makes our boy sigh in pain, as he has to deal with the special admission students, and tells everyone to calm down and instead hear him out. Yuwon mentions that a class president does not need to be the strongest and actually should not be the strongest, which makes Yun curious about the reason, so she asks Yuwon for the reason behind it, to which Yuwon responds that if the class president is the strongest person, then they will make all of the decisions on their own. Yuwon mentions that a class president, whose sole purpose is to unite the whole class, cannot make all of the decisions on their own. Yuwon's response renders everyone silent. However, Yuwon adds that the class president needs to be in the middle, someone who can offer fair and good solutions for everyone, so following that, the class president should be the most easygoing person like Yuwon himself. Yun has suspicions about Yuwon being the easygoing person. However, she decides to go along with his reasoning for now, since the professor who is in charge of the class has the authority to appoint the class president, and starts to walk out. But before she goes, Yun mentions that the only person she wanted to lead the most is Yuwon, which sends shivers down Yuwon's spine. Yun further adds that even if there is something that she finds unnecessary, then she will have to accept that unnecessary as well if she wants to get what she desires. Yun's comment shocks both a Slight and Rachel, while a Slight, on the other hand, is quite irritated by it, but Yuwon tells him to calm down. Yuwon lays down his head on the table after dealing with the drama at the very first, which makes him feel like he is on a battlefield instead of a school. Yuwon thinks that the issue of pride will take time to resolve, so he decides to take things slow. But as he is wondering about how can he work efficiently as a class representative, Rachel makes puppy eyes in front of Yuwon, asking him if the cute snake from before is gone now, as she really wanted to touch it once more. Rachel's bizarre request makes Yuwon feel like he is standing in a place that is full of landmines. However, this also did not stop here, as Ban Yuan's first lesson as the class president of Class 11, which was filled with unique individuals, started off with lots of difficulties, as the other students wants to take down the special students. The reason for this fiery environment is because of the announcement from the professor, who thinks that they should start today's lesson with a light sparring session. The regular students are fired up to crush the special students and are fighting one another over who is going to fight them. Some of them even go as far as to directly call the special students to come to the fighting arena, while others are irritated to see Professor Yamina's brooch on Yuan's uniform. A Slight is amazed to find out that the Union Academy divides the classes based on abilities of the student, and he also notices that Special Class 1 seems to hate them, only because they are special admission. However, Yuan believes that it is because he is wearing something provocative that has started this. One of the students is angered to see Yuan, whom he considers a weakling, wear a brooch from Professor Yamina, who is known as the goddess of flowers, but what angers him more is the fact that Yuan had the nerve to wear it in front of him, as this is something he will never acknowledge. So he shouts loudly at Professor, which silences the rest of Class 1, to allow him to test Yuan's skill himself. The professor accepts his proposal and tells Yuan to step up, as he would be sparring with Erecto, the student who is furious at him. The scene shifts to Professor Yamina, who is observing the special admission students in their recent class. She is surprised to discover that her students are having a joint session with Special Class 1 on their very first day. What surprises her even more is that the first period is focused on comprehensive practical combat, a highly advanced subject unsuitable for beginners. She finds it implausible that a student from the lower dimension special admissions group could spar with upper dimension students. Professor Yamina suspects that someone deliberately designed the curriculum this way, and while she doesn't know who is responsible, she senses malice behind the setup. During the session, the professor leading the joint class calls Yuan to the arena, announcing that he will be sparring with Erecto. Yuan politely declines, apologizing and explaining that he doesn't believe he can gain anything from the match due to his lack of combat skills. The professor, unimpressed, deducts 3 points from Yuan's credit score and insists that he step into the arena, dismissing his excuse. Yuan, perplexed by the professor's behavior, begins to suspect that the professor's intention might be to humiliate him in front of everyone. Yuan calmly tells the professor that his statement is not an excuse but a fact. He explains that he wasn't accepted as a special admission student for his combat abilities, but rather for the unique skill set he possesses. Offering a solution, Yuan suggests that if the professor is truly curious about his capabilities, it would make more sense to assess him in a way that aligns with his strengths, rather than forcing him into a sparring match. The professor, however, grows visibly angry, clearly displeased by what he perceives as a first-year student lecturing him. Yuan, unfazed, counters that learning is necessary for everyone, whether they are a student or a professor. He even reminds the professor that he is merely an assistant professor, subtly challenging his authority. This infuriates the professor further, prompting him to deduct 5 additional points from Yuan's credit score. Realizing that the professor has no intention of listening to reason, Yuan changes tactics. He suggests postponing the sparring match by a week, explaining that with just a week of preparation, he would be better equipped to participate. The students of Special Class 1, however, find Yuan's suggestion laughable, unable to believe that a mere week of preparation could make any difference. Because there is no way Yuan could possibly stand up to them after only a week, given that his abilities appear to be at rock bottom. The professor, visibly displeased with how Yuan seems to be ignoring his authority and setting the schedule on his own terms, grudgingly accepts the suggestion. Meanwhile, Yuan pointedly reminds the professor that he wouldn't be able to enforce anything since he isn't even a full professor. The professor grows increasingly irritated by Yuan's remarks, but chooses to hold his tongue. Announcing the decision, the professor declares that there will be an official sparring match between Erecto and Yuan next Tuesday. He emphasizes that the match will be entirely public and broadcast live throughout Union Academy. This revelation makes Yuan realize that the professor's intent goes beyond simple humiliation. He is deliberately turning the match into a spectacle. The professor warns Yuan that if he fails to display his abilities after asking for preparation time, the consequences will not be favorable. Yuan, however, responds with a cold and measured yes, which only serves to further aggravate the professor. Afterward, Yuan calls out to Erecto, stating confidently that he is looking forward to their match next week. Erecto, however, does not offer a polite response, his demeanor cold and dismissive, as he finds Yuan annoying for wearing the brooch from Professor Yamina. However, Yuan wasn't expecting a polite response from Erecto. His intention in calling him out wasn't to engage in banter, but to use his eyes of infinite reading to confirm Erecto's stats. This unique ability allows Yuan to read everything about a target, and depending on his proficiency, it offers deeper insights into the target's aura and spirit. Yuan quickly discovers that Erecto's life force and physical stats are absurdly high, as expected from a student of the special class. Erecto's life force is 5 times greater than Yuan's, and his body is 10 times stronger. Despite this overwhelming difference, Yuan observes that Erecto is still nowhere near the level of Rachel and a slight. He realizes that to climb the tower alongside his classmates, he must at least surpass Erecto's current level. As Yuan returns to his classmates, he notices that both Rachel and a slight appear unusually gloomy. Wondering if they are worried about him, he is about to ask when he suddenly hears Yun challenging the students of Special Class 1 to a fight. Unlike Yuan, Yun specializes in combat and boldly announces that anyone curious about the skills of special admission students is welcome to step up and face her, as she is more than willing to accept a sparring challenge. However, the entire class remains silent. Even Yuan cannot fully grasp the extent of Yun's strength, and it is clear that the students in Class 1 can sense her overwhelming aura. To provoke them further, Yun offers to provide a handicap if they lack confidence and specifically taunts Erecto, believing he is not the type to hold back. Yuan, observing the situation, thinks Erecto must be terrified. Being challenged by someone like Yun is entirely unexpected, and everyone knows that if Erecto were to face her, he would likely be left so injured that recovering in a week would be nearly impossible. Though this situation is none of Yuan's concern, he decides to intervene. He asks Yun not to fight Erecto, reminding her that he has a sparring match scheduled with Erecto next week. Yuan adds that if Yun truly wants to fight him, she should wait for her turn. Yun, slightly taken aback, asks if Yuan is sure about this. Yuan firmly responds that he needs to prove his worth with his own abilities and sincerely thanks her for checking on him. This unexpected display of confidence surprises Yun. She had assumed Yuan relied solely on tricks, but his resolute stance challenges her perception of him. Yun decides to let Yuan handle things his own way and, instead of focusing on Erecto, redirects her challenge to the rest of Special Class 1. However, even after waiting for a considerable time, no one steps forward to face her. Disappointed, Yun remarks on the cowardice of Special Class 1, pointing out that moments ago, they were all loudly boasting, but now faced with a genuine threat, they are practically groveling on the ground. Letting out a frustrated sigh, she begins to walk out of the fighting arena, her actions clearly irritating many of the students in Special Class 1. As she exits, a blonde-haired student finally speaks up. The student sneers at Yun, looking down on her with disdain. He comments that it's always the weak and foolish who band together in packs, growling and pretending to protect their little groups, a sight he finds both pathetic and amusing. Yuan finds the blonde-haired student strikingly different from the rest of the special class. Even among this elite group, the student seems to be operating on an entirely different level. A slide explains to Yuan that the student is Ortima, the ruler of the Kedius dimension. However, Yuan has no knowledge of either Kedius or Ortima, which surprises a slide. A slide elaborates that outside of the Union, there are 10 dimensions with the highest hierarchies, and Ortima belongs to a ruling family that governs one of them. This revelation means Ortima hails from one of the top 10 most powerful families across all dimensions. Ortima descends the stairs with an air of authority, eventually stepping into the arena and signaling the professor to record the fight. The professor retrieves a recording device, catching Rachel's attention. Curious, she asks about the device in the professor's hand. A slight speculates that the recording might be intended for a public video, possibly to share the events of the fight on the intranet. However, a slight admits he has no idea what sharing or intranet actually means. Recognizing the concept, Yuan realizes it parallels something from his own world. He explains to a slight that an intranet is a network established by companies or educational institutions for the purpose of exchanging information. A slight is curious about how Yuan, who comes from a lower dimension that didn't even know about the Union, has knowledge of concepts like the intranet and sharing. He asks our boy about it, to which Yuan explains that things in his dimension were beginning to develop in that direction. With that, Yuan proceeds to locate the school intranet. While exploring, Rachel points out a live channel to Yuan that features videos of their classes. Intrigued, Yuan clicks on it, only to discover that the fight between Yun and Ortima is being broadcast live. This realization makes Yuan suspect that their professor is attempting to publicly embarrass them. However, Yuan doubts the situation will unfold as the professor expects. The scene shifts to Yun and Ortima, who are preparing to fight. Yun, after dismissively calling Ortima a novice, gives him the chance to make the first move. This infuriates Ortima, who decides to put an end to what he perceives as Yun's arrogance. Ortima straightens his arm and commands Yun to kneel as he unleashes his attack. The ability exerts massive pressure across the entire class, surprising Yuan. Unlike the power he controls, Ortima's ability feels like water flowing from a high place to a low one, or like the sensation of being unable to breathe without air. Yuan realizes that the very law of nature, along with everything in this space, is compelling him to kneel before Ortima, as though it is the most natural thing in the world. He remarks that Ortima's power feels like a distortion of natural law, a revelation that surprises us slight. Yuan was able to deduce the principle behind Ortima's ability after experiencing it only once. As the class struggles under the pressure of Ortima's power, Rachel suddenly begins acting strangely. Her attention is fixated on Yun, who is slowly starting to unleash her own power. With seemingly minimal effort, Yun uses her ability to effortlessly neutralize Ortima's attack, leaving Yuan astonished. He marvels at how Yun was able to completely extinguish her opponent's energy merely by raising her own. Ortima, amazed by Yun's display of power, grudgingly acknowledges her strength. However, Yun dismisses his abilities, comparing them to his two horns and calling them equally ridiculous. She goes on to express her disappointment, saying that if this is all Ortima is capable of, he has nothing to offer. Enraged, Ortima declares that he has far more power to show, and begins to unleash his next ability. But before he can complete the move, Yun closes the distance and lands a powerful kick to Ortima's stomach, interrupting him mid-action. Yun tells Ortima there is no way she will let him repeat the same attack twice, especially since it's an obvious move that grows stronger as the opponent gets closer. Despite her swift action, Ortima manages to block Yun's attack using both hands, though it's clear he finds the situation unpleasant. Without missing a beat, Yun swiftly moves behind Ortima, taunting him with a sharp remark. If someone lacks brains, their body must work harder. Provoked, Ortima swings his arm in an attempt to punch Yun. However, she easily dodges by crouching, having anticipated his stiff and clumsy movements. Yun is incredulous at Ortima's failure to understand such a simple mistake, remarking that it seems she has to spoon-feed him everything. She follows up with a kick to Ortima's face, further enraging him. Ortima retaliates by trying to land another punch. Yun evades by jumping, using the opportunity to reposition herself and take a more strategic stance. A slight watches in disbelief as Yun completely overwhelms Ortima, the ruler of Kedius. Meanwhile, Yuan observes the situation with sharp insight. He comments that Ortima relies heavily on suppressing his opponent's movements and defeating them using his distortion of natural law. This time, however, his usual method is proving ineffective against Yun. Ortima finds himself completely overwhelmed by Yun as she continues to land strike after strike on his face, giving him no opportunity to recover. Yuan observes the fight, noting that while Ortima possesses immense power and exceptional physical abilities, it's evident he has never truly trained his body for combat. This insight surprises us slight, who realizes just how unique Yuan and Yun are as special admissions students from the lower dimension. Yun is holding her own against Ortima, while Yuan has managed to analyze and grasp the principles behind both their abilities. A slight, struggling to comprehend what he's witnessing, is left in awe. Ortima, however, grows increasingly frustrated, feeling insulted that someone from a lower dimension like Yun could challenge him so effectively. While voicing his indignation, Ortima is interrupted when Yun lands another powerful punch to his face. Enraged, Ortima tries to smash Yun into the ground with all his might. However, Yun anticipates his move and swiftly dodges by jumping to the side. Ortima, now utterly humiliated, becomes consumed with anger. His frustration reaches its peak, and he decides to unleash his full power to take down Yun. With tension mounting, Yun and Ortima charge at each other. However, just as their attacks are about to collide, Professor Yamina intervenes, stopping the fight with a single clap. To everyone's surprise, the entire area transforms into a tranquil field filled with vibrant flowers and a mesmerizing scent that engulfs the surroundings. The sudden change leaves both Yun and Ortima astonished. Professor Yamina addresses them sternly, explaining that at Union Academy, professors do not condone duel between students. She advises them to reserve their strength for challenges like the Tower of Babel. With a snap of her fingers, Professor Yamina undoes the transformed field, restoring everything to normal. Yuan, watching from the sidelines, is stunned by the surreal sequence of events. He briefly wonders if it was a hallucination, but the lingering strong scent of flowers leaves him baffled. Ortima, still annoyed by his inability to defeat Yun, seethes with frustration. Yun, on the other hand, praises Professor Yamina for her impressive display of strength and control, acknowledging her as a formidable figure at the academy. Yun walks over to her classmates and asks Yu-won for his opinion on her fight. Our boy responds that the fight was incredible, and even watching it was immensely helpful for him. As he speaks, Rachel suddenly grabs him from behind, surprising Yu-won. He turns to ask Rachel if she is still scared of Yun. While encouraging her not to be afraid, Yu-won overhears Professor Yamina scolding Professor Farrell, the assistant professor, for poorly conducting the class. She reprimands him for attempting to pass off a sparring session as a proper class and for allowing it to escalate out of control while passively watching, despite knowing it was a major error. Professor Farrell apologizes, but Professor Yamina informs him that his actions cannot be resolved with simple apology and warns him to prepare for a fitting punishment. After addressing Farrell, Professor Yamina approaches Yu-won and adjusts the brooch she had given him, reminding our boy that, as class president, maintaining dignity is of utmost importance. Yu-won is reminded by Professor Yamina that as class president, he must not wear his badge upside down. After ensuring all immediate issues are addressed, Professor Yamina leaves the class with Professor Farrell. However, her act of adjusting Yu-won's brooch inadvertently stirs another problem, as it incites anger among the students of Special Class 1. They cannot believe that someone they perceive as a weakling, like Yu-won, would receive such attention and privilege. The scene then shifts to the cafeteria, where Yu-won is seated with his classmates, checking the school's reactions following Yun's recent fight with Ortama, the ruler of the Kedius dimension. Before watching the fight, most students were shocked to hear that Yun, someone from a lower dimension, had completely overwhelmed Ortama, a feat they found difficult to comprehend. Some students initially defended Ortama, considering him the top student of the year, but after witnessing the fight, they not only became fans of Yun but also withdrew their support for Ortama. Additionally, the students observed how Yu-won skillfully negotiated with Professor Farrell using sharp words, earning him the nickname Bargaining Master and gaining him newfound admiration, with many becoming fond of our boy. However, this fondness for Yu-won does not last long when students see Professor Yamina appear out of nowhere to adjust his brooch, an act that irritates many of them. Yu-won, unfazed, tells his classmates that the whole world is talking about them. A Slight and Yun, however, struggle to understand the online chatter, as they are unfamiliar with internet slang. Yun is surprised to learn that many students consider Ortama the top prospect, a belief she dismisses as incorrect. She points out that there is someone else in the special class who is far more capable than Ortama. Yun expresses her disappointment that Yu-won failed to notice this, to which our boy explains that he was too engrossed in her sparring match with Ortama to notice anything else. Meanwhile, A Slight, still trying to decipher internet slang, cannot understand why Yu-won is famous online. He is particularly puzzled by the title Bargaining Master. Our boy explains to A Slight that since the students cannot criticize the person who completely outclassed the top prospect, Yun, they have shifted their focus to him, blaming him for not accepting Erecto's challenge. Yun then chimes in, noting that Yu-won is famous on the internet for another reason entirely. As they talk, A Slight notices that Rachel is sitting far away from the group and asks if they have always been this distant. Yu-won glances at Rachel and realizes she seems terrified of Yun, making it difficult for her to approach. Our boy wonders if Rachel is still shaken by what she witnessed earlier and decides to help her feel more at ease with something sweet. Reaching into his inventory, Yu-won takes out a jar and tells everyone to check out the special elixir he crafted using his abilities. The elixir, a concentrate made from thousands of fruits, is designed to promote overall stat growth. Initially, Yun and A Slight see nothing remarkable about the jar, but Yu-won assures them they will be amazed. He asks both of them for bread and spreads the elixir on it. The sweet aroma quickly catches Rachel's attention, surprising her with its delightful scent. When Yun and A Slight taste the elixir, they are astonished. A Slight finds it indescribably good, while Yun, who has sampled countless sweets from the Central Plains, declares its taste to be on an entirely different level. Yu-won notices Rachel drooling over the aroma of the elixir and invites her to join them. Without hesitation, Rachel quickly drags her chair toward Yu-won and asks our boy if he can make her a sandwich using the special elixir. Yu-won smiles and responds that it's easy. The moment Rachel tastes the sandwich, she experiences pure bliss, savoring the elixir's essence, which captures the true flavor of fruit. She declares it the most delicious fruit flavor she has ever tasted. A Slight is astonished that Yu-won was able to create something so remarkable using his abilities. Yun, equally impressed, asks our boy if she can have more of the elixir. Yu-won assures her she can have as much as she likes. Yun remarks that the elixir feels incredibly precious, but Yu-won reassures her that it isn't expensive and that, as a team, they should share good things. He suggests she see it as a return favor for the kindness she showed him earlier. However, Yun feels that isn't enough, so she resolves to personally teach Yu-won a martial art in return for the elixir he shared with her. The scene shifts to the training room, where Yun and Yu-won teleport so Yun can teach our boy a martial art as a return favor for the elixir. Yun remarks that this place is suitable, as it allows her to move freely and gives her a strange sense of calm. Yu-won quickly realizes that this training room reflects the psychological environment of its user, something he finds fitting for a union class. Our boy asks Yun what she plans to teach him, joking that it had better be something good since he left his meal unfinished to come here. Yun, seemingly ignoring his comment, grabs a wooden sword from the equipment rack and begins swinging it with precision. She warns Yu-won not to move carelessly and deliberates on what technique she should teach him. Yun then takes a proper stance and thrusts the wooden sword toward Yu-won, stopping just short of hitting him. She ensures she doesn't injure him before his upcoming fight. The thrust is executed so flawlessly, with neither hesitation nor doubt, that it is hard to believe such a piercing strike was performed by a human. In that brief moment, Yu-won experiences a revelation and discovers a new concept, insight. Yu-won struggles to understand why he grasped the concept of piercing, even though he is learning swordsmanship. Noticing that Yu-won seems lost in thought, Yun tells him to focus and pay attention. She explains that a thrust does not exist in just one form. Yun informs our boy that a thrust can be executed with a sword, elbow, leg, or even an ankle, and what she is currently demonstrating is the most basic and fundamental meaning of a thrust. She further elaborates that a thrust is defined not only by the number of times it is performed, but also by the angle and, most importantly, the force or aura behind it. Yun mentions that while there are countless variations of thrusts, the ones she has shown Yu-won are the ultimate basics. Yu-won is amazed by Yun's clear and insightful explanation. He realizes that her mastery of a single concept to its utmost depth feels far more profound than combining several concepts together. To our boy, this refinement epitomizes the essence of thrust, as demonstrated by Yun. When Yun asks him to try it himself, Yu-won agrees, warning her to bear with him since it will likely be a clumsy imitation. Yun remarks that if Yu-won were able to perfectly replicate her thrust on the first try, it would render the years she spent mastering it meaningless. However, before she can finish her thought, Yu-won flawlessly executes a thrust, leaving Yun shocked. It is nearly impossible to grasp the concept so quickly after seeing it just once. Despite his success, Yu-won feels that he still hasn't fully replicated it. He attributes this to his prior habit of focusing too much on mixing concepts, as our boy believed he could only strengthen them by combining or adding elements. Now, Yu-won realizes he was mistaken. True strength lies in refining what he already possesses. He continues to ponder why he received the character for penetration when there are many other characters related to thrusting, as a deadly move that must pierce its target without fail. Exhausted from practicing, Yu-won finally hears Yun telling him to stop. She advises him not to push himself too hard from the very beginning, encouraging him to take it slow for better results. Yun advises Yu-won to remember what she showed him earlier and suggests he try it again later in a larger space or against an opponent he can truly fight. As Yu-won sits there exhausted, he suddenly receives a flurry of system messages, startling him. He discovers that his stats have increased significantly, merely from practicing sword swings. The system reveals that Yu-won has understood and internalized the concept of martial arts, allowing him to incorporate swordsmanship as a subconcept of it. Additionally, our boy has grasped and internalized the concept of penetration, and he has also successfully observed and understood the concept of movement. This progress has raised the depth of his eyes of infinite reading to 110. What shocks Yu-won the most, however, is that his newly acquired concept of perception has already reached 16, and his swordsmanship, a stat that hadn't improved much no matter how many goblins he defeated, has now jumped to 20. Yu-won begins to wonder if it's even possible for his combat abilities to double so dramatically overall. As he processes this extraordinary growth, Yun comments that she hadn't expected to lose out like this. She admits she didn't foresee Yu-won mastering the essence of the technique, a concept free from the confines of any specific weapon. Yun gives Yu-won an envious stare, while our boy explains that he simply followed her movements without realizing it. Yun replies that if merely showing something made it easy to understand and imitate, then no one would struggle to master anything. Our boy counters by saying that the reason he executed it so well might be because of Yun's excellent teaching. He adds that when he watched her movements for the first time, he could sense the profound depth behind them. It made Yuan wonder if a person could truly train to such a level, and this thought captivated him so deeply that he lost track of time for a moment. Hearing this, Yun becomes slightly embarrassed. Although they haven't known each other for long, Yuan says such things with ease. Perplexed by her reaction, Yuan brushes it off and praises Yun's teaching, suggesting that she can leave the elixir to him from now on. However, Yun dismisses the idea, saying it doesn't compensate for what she taught him today. Confused, Yuan asks Yun how he can properly return her favor. Yun responds that Yuan doesn't need to worry about repaying her, as she plans to make up for today's loss over time. She warns our boy to be prepared,